Hello and welcome to Real-Ationship Talk, the podcast hosted by yours truly, Teresha Young, relationship master coach, where we have open, non-judgmental, heart-to-heart conversations about love, self-love, self-care, dating and relationships. And for this week's episode, I am being joined by the awesome Mathew Shannon. Welcome to the show, Mathew.
Hey, thanks for having me, Teresha. I appreciate the opportunity to be here with you all.
Oh, I'm so excited for this conversation because, I just know we've got so much to share. So, what I'm going to do firstly is I'm going to let everybody know who doesn't know who Mathew is a bit more about yourself. So, Mathew is a global inclusion, diversity, and equity leader who cultivates psychological safety, develops programs and strategies that foster belonging while strengthening organizational outcomes. Mathew leverages his experience, partnerships, knowledge, and interpersonal skills to help people strengthen their personal and professional relationships. As a certified trainer and coach for the 4 stages of psychological safety, Mathew consults with leaders to develop solutions that decrease social friction and increase innovation. Thought leadership, data, and collaborative critical thinking are key factors in Mathew's approach to building sustainable and equitable systems that nurture our well-being while creating space for our most valuable contributions. Wow, Mathew, that is such a powerful, powerful bit of work that you do there. And some of the key words that were jumping out at me when I read your introduction was safety and belonging, because if you reference Maslow's hierarchy of needs, for example, those are two of the basic needs, two of the core basic needs that people desire in their life and really crave. So I'll be absolutely honored, and I'm sure the audience too, if you could share a bit of the key highlights of your life and your career that led you to doing all that you do now.
Sure. And thank you for again, for the introduction. I would say some key things that have, played a role in my life and led me to kind of where I'm at now is one, just how I grew up. So I grew up in a small family. It was me, my mom, my brother, and my household. And um, you know, we didn't come from like this huge like background of wealth. Um, but we did have a house that was full of love.
Mm.
And growing up with a mother who um, understood how to provide, how to handle business, how to take care of things, and make sure that me and my brother always had what we needed and much of what we wanted, um, helped me feel safe, right?
Mm.
Um, it wasn't money that I needed to feel safe. It was the relationship I had with my mom and the relationship I had with my brother. So my family was intact, even though mainstream society might call that family structure broken.
Mm.
We have a broken home because there's not a father in the home.
Yeah.
Well, I was in touch with my dad. He wasn't, living in my household. So there was this examination or perspective I had on the world of, you know, this is how, my situation is. There's a lot of other people who have different situations growing up and then attending school, maintaining like friendships and being a part of sports teams, working my first jobs, so on and so forth. All these different experiences added to my perspective. And at the end of it all, uh, I've always noticed a common theme of I tend to care a lot about people
Mm.
in a way that wasn't necessarily uh, commonly exemplified in mainstream society
Yeah.
from my observations. And so, in the work that I do now, I have the opportunity to help build and cultivate a culture where people um, have higher quality interpersonal interactions that lead them to being able to bring their best self forward, their best work forward. And um, it doesn't mean that it's easy and it's not all kumbaya, but what it is it's understanding that kind of how you mentioned earlier, like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, there are real needs that people have, and there are real behaviors that demonstrate um, that you care about those needs. And then, there's the collaboration that has to take place in order for people to be able to, one, communicate their needs, because people don't just read minds and be like, oh, I know what you need.
Yeah.
It's like,
What a gift
oh,
that would be.
exactly, exactly. So people need to, you know, feel that they're empowered to communicate. And when they do communicate, the people who are receiving those communications um, should be able to uh, have mechanisms, behaviors, routines in place that help them receive that communication and do something productive with it. So
Mm,
I know that's a lot, but I was trying to be succinct with
yeah.
a whole lifetime of experience can't be really summed up in like a couple minutes.
No, of course not. But that was a very succinct overview of your experiences. So I do appreciate that. And two things I really like to touch upon there. Firstly, it was your upbringing and that you would be considered to be from a broken home.
Mm.
However, I just wondered, do you feel that being raised single-handedly by your mother, I know you said that your father was part of your life too, but predominantly just in the household with your mum and your brother, that had a bearing on your relationships growing up and even into your adult relationship?
Yeah, I would say it it has an unseen effect at first. And people always say hindsight is 2020. So
Mm,
it's like you grow up and basically there's a point in life where your dominant influences switch from being your parents to
mm,
your peers. And so you're in school all day long. Um, most of the words you say all day are not exchanged between you and your parent. They're exchanged between you and your friends
yeah.
or your acquaintances at school. And then, um, you communicate with your mom or your dad or both parents or your grandma or whoever raised you. And, you know, those exchanges, they're important and impactful, but your dominant ideas about who you need to be start to get more and more influenced by your environment as time goes on. So um, I would say it's super important that foundationally in your home that you have a strong sense of self and direction. Um, and yet you have a strong sense of adaptability and understanding to be able to be a critical thinker. So to
Mm,
be able to observe the world and understand there's more than what I know right now. And I need to be flexible to continue adding to my perspective because all I know is not all there is to know. So there's a lot that I learned, and there was a lot of, influence that my household had on me. However, as I began to, attend school and go to high school and go to college and work jobs and stuff like that, there's more perspectives that I was open to
mm.
listening to. And I think that is the key is being open to understanding that there's more out there than what you know so that you can add to your understanding as you grow.
Yeah. So when you were talking there, you spoke about critical thinking, and in order to have that perspective, you really have to be quite open-minded to seeing things differently. And at what stage, because you've spoken about the four stages of psychological safety. Now, I would imagine that that involves some sort of critical thinking and how that links, because in order to think differently, you have to feel safe enough to and vulnerable enough to think differently. So something that you spoke about before was how you noticed that you cared for people. And that's quite a soft skill, I would say, for people to have, particularly in the workplace where you probably are more strategic and you're doing, the hardballing kind of stuff. So
Hmm.
I would love to know more about the four stages of psychological safety and how that is linked perhaps with the caring aspect, if there is a link, caring and also critical thinking, if that makes sense.
Sure. So I'll do my best to link in, and then if you have any follow-up questions, I'm happy to answer those.
Yeah.
Um, so jumping into psychological safety, um, psychological safety kind of came about, um, you know, sometime around 1960, 1970s, and initially it was a body of work that um, was adding on to um, physical safety. So a
Mm.
lot of people, when you hear the word safety, you think about, you know, are you safe physically? Are
Yeah.
you, you know, not in the presence of any sort of physical threat? But
Mm.
most of the time, people are not thinking about their psychological safety.
Yeah.
And so there's been several folks who have kind of done a lot of research and taken this body of work, to the next iteration and next level or adding on to it. And I had the opportunity to learn from a guy named Dr. Timothy Clark, and he works and owns a company called Leader Factor. And
Mm.
so Leader Factor has this certification program where they take you through psychological safety and can become a trainer or a coach, or you could just attend their workshops and just learn more about the topic. So um, I was super interested in it after attending several of their workshops and was fortunate enough to have the opportunity to go through the certification process. And what I learned in there was quite a bit, but I'll just take you through the framework. So it focuses on a continuum that's based on a axis of respect and permission.
Okay.
And it starts with the first stage being inclusion safety, which is, do I feel included?
Mm.
Or am I experiencing inclusion? And then the next phase is learner safety. So is it safe for me to learn here? And then the next phase is contributor safety, and
Mm.
followed by challenger safety. And so a lot of times people ask, is this a continuum or can you just jump to challenger safety? Can you just
Yeah.
jump to contributor safety? And the answer would be, in short, no. When you first get into any environment, what's the first thing that you do? Do you immediately start contributing or do you immediately start learning? Um, First, you need to be invited. So, do you feel included? Or are you experiencing inclusion? So,
Mm.
and then you can get to challenger safety. But in order for you to get there, you have to continue maintaining inclusion safety. You have to be included. You have to feel safe to learn. You have to be in an environment where you can make some mistakes, but not, have the whole situation be ruined. So, you have to also be given the opportunity to make a contribution. And then you have to be able to be in a space where you can provide feedback without someone's ego getting in the way
Mm.
or someone basically slapping you on the hand for calling them out or
Yeah.
for bringing up a new idea and challenging the status quo. So there are several, elements to psychological safety that I could go deeper into. Um, but as you said, how it relates and correlates to,
Mm.
you asked me like
Yeah,
connection.
to critical thinking. So
Okay.
yeah.
So yeah, so when you think about those those four stages and you think about critical thinking, take it to a place where you say, um, how do I do this in real time?
Mm.
Because often that's what happens in life is that people may learn something and that's like kind of what we did in schools. We learn something and we use it for a short period of time because we usually need it to pass a test. And after we pass the test, we're on to something else. And very little of that information stuck with us. But the thing that did stick with us was what we were experiencing. So um, you have to be intentional about critical thinking
Mm.
and you have to be intentional about building and maintaining psychological safety. So that's where I say the two are connected is in
Mm.
intentionality. And they don't happen by default. They happen by design.
I love that because a lot, I can see how that can link into the topic and theme of dating and relationships, intentionality, and to being able to have that on a very conscious level. A lot of the people that I work with, their main desire is to build conscious relationships where they are living intentionally and relationships that are full of meaning, being able to communicate, being given that permission to communicate and feeling safe to communicate in that relationship as well. So a lot of, I'm going to see if I can link it really, is being able to communicate your wants and your needs. So we've spoken about some of those basic needs as well. So from your perspective, and I'm really trying to, for the audience as well, get more of a balance when it comes to different perspectives from males, from females. So from your observations of what you've seen in the current world too, in terms of relationships, what would you say are some of the key issues that you've observed in terms of people communicating, for example, or feeling safe to
Mm-hmm.
communicate?
I think one kind of goes back to what I mentioned before is who's influencing you.
Mm,
Um, and there's something, a thing now people are calling themselves influencers.
mm,
Um, being a self-proclaimed influencer is dangerous because you may have some delusional ideas that you are actually influential.
mm,
Um, and so what I mean by that is someone can decide that they have this idea that they want to share, and it's a personal opinion which everybody's entitled to. And so basically go and shout it from the mountaintop, and there's a couple people who heard what you had to say, and that's fine. But it's like, what is the intent behind your idea?
mm,
So now we take it a step deeper and we look at narratives, and we'll say, what are the main narratives right now floating around in all of these different influencers
yes.
content? And then we say, what are the main narratives floating around in mainstream media content?
Mm,
And so that gets to the crux of your question regarding what are some of the main things, that are challenging people in their relationships today, is they're being influenced by narratives that are not healthy and productive for healthy relational outcomes.
yeah.
And they're using that information
Mm,
and trying to get healthy outcomes. And I don't mean to laugh in a way, because it's really causing some serious challenges, and
mm,
I've experienced some of those as well. I'm just smiling about it because um, it is crazy to see something that is so harmful being so successful
yeah.
when you think humanity is smart, capable, intelligent, full of potential, but it's not utilizing that critical thinking that we just discussed to
Mm,
evaluate what's right in front of their faces, to say, hey, would that be good for us? Would that be good for me? You know what I mean?
yes.
And then instead of saying, nah, that's not good for me, I'm not going to do that. Instead, I'm going to do this, because when you decide you're not going to do something, you also have to decide to do something else instead.
Mm,
And that goes back to the intentional part,
it
because
does.
otherwise you just float on default. So like I could decide I'm not going to eat junk food this week, but if I don't decide to eat something else, then the impact of what I was trying to do is kind of mitigated. So I was
Mm,
trying to actually make a healthy choice, but I made like a half healthy choice. I said I'm not going to eat junk food, but I didn't say I was going to eat healthy food. So
mm,
what are you going to do then? You're just going to like drink water or eat something that's kind of in between, or
yeah.
are you going to eat at all? Like you have to then choose, okay, I'm going to eat healthy food. And that's just like a really simple example, but it's like you have to replace something with something else. So there's a notion that a lot of people don't like to really face, and that's uh, the fact that everything that you do, it by default, it causes you not to be able to do something else. So there's trade-off, right? And so if you're going to let go of this other narrative and say, I'm not doing that mainstream thing, I'm not with this style of relationship, I'm not with um, having a partner who doesn't, want to communicate, having a partner who doesn't think it's important to put the work into our relationship in order to make it
Mm,
successful. They should just be able to kind of float around and do whatever they want, or I should just be able to float around and do whatever I want. And whatever your mindset is, you have to say, not only am I not going to do that, I'm going to do this instead. And
gosh.
I'm going to set up these boundaries that are going to keep me from connecting with people in the future who want that. So
Yeah.
we do a whole conversation about red flags and all that stuff, but people got to be intentional.
And so much what you said there is, oh my gosh. So, one of the things that you spoke about is, for example, if you were to leave, for example, that group mentality, the dysfunctional narrative,
Mhm.
it's almost like you are taking yourself away from being included. And inclusion is one of those key things of psychological safety.
Yes.
So when you are excluding yourself, then what's the motivation for, where are you going? And I suppose this is maybe where you have that group thinking and that group belonging, because it doesn't feel safe if you exclude yourself.
Yeah. So that's like the story of my life, in a sense. So I have an athletic background. I like ran track pretty much my whole life. I
Mm,
played football, I played basketball, and you know, just kind of like throughout all those different experiences, um, a lot of you know things that I experienced was like teammates wanting to party,
mm,
um, and party. That's just
yeah.
like super ambiguous, right? So what does that mean? So a lot of them, it was party was let's go to such and such's place and drink, and
Mm,
that wasn't my thing, right? So I was like, I can't, I don't really want to do that. I work super hard at practice all week, whatever the case may be, and I'm like, I'm trying to like make it to this other level or whatever, and so feeling that like you don't fit in
mm,
with the group, um, like you fit in on the field or on the court or on the track. You know what I mean? Everybody's high fiving you
yeah.
and calling your name and cheering for you and telling you how amazing you are and all this stuff. And then, but when it comes time to hang out, the things that they want to do to hang out wasn't always really the things I want to do to hang out. So, um, the pain of isolation is something that I know very well, and there are other people in the world who know that pain very well, and I feel you. And shout out to you for having the wherewithal just to withstand that
Mm,
feeling of I don't fit in with that group, but I do fit in somewhere.
yeah.
So you have to be able to remember that there are a lot of spaces and groups that you do fit in. And maybe your life trajectory so far has kind of caused you to make decisions where you were trying to exist in spaces that weren't healthy for you
Yeah.
and exist in close proximity with people who weren't safe for you. So um, when you do the self work and figure out why is that, why was I choosing to adapt this narrative that was not healthy for me? It was actually harming me
Yeah.
because that's the truth of it is that it's not just that something's not healthy, it's that it's unhealthy,
Mm,
right? And that's a step that people don't take typically. They be like, this is not good for me. They'll say something like that. But if people really want to embrace and make change, like they have to do something what I call is like fast forward.
yeah.
So if this continued into next week, into next month, into next year, in the next 2 years, 5 years, what does this look like then? So
Mm,
you see, like child behaviors, and I'll just go off on this quick tangent, but like discipline and correction, right, for a child. Um, Parents and folks try to correct children because they know that as the child grows up, they can't throw these kind of tantrums and fits, um, at 18 years old, that they were throwing at 12 years old, and they can't throw the same tantrums they were throwing at 4 years
mm,
old, at 12 years old. Like there's a growth that has to take place. And we see in society oftentimes when people don't self-reflect or they don't have anybody to hold them accountable, their tantrums, or in other words, the way that they act out,
yeah.
that behavior just gets expressed differently, but it's
Yeah.
the same behavior. It's the same tantrum. It's
Mm,
the same passive aggressive, um, disrespectful way of dealing with people and situations when something happens that you don't like that you did when you were a kid, but
Mm.
now you're doing it as an adult and it's super, super unattractive. And so there are things that, people do because they're not embracing, like I said, replacing a behavior with something. So it's not enough to say, I'm going to work on that. Like you have to say, I'm actually going to work on this.
Yeah.
Like I'm going to do this. So that's the critical thinking part. Again, like in real time, did you realize like you were having a reaction, you were triggered by something, and then you were like, oh, in fact, I'm actually going to do the opposite. So in a relationship sense, you may say,
Mm.
um, my significant other just did something that, bothered me, but I realize now kind of like our cycle of communication, I'm going to break it. So this time I'm actually going to lean in. I'm going to, hold their hand and say, hey, are you okay right now? Or, is
Yeah.
there anything I can do to better support you? Um, I know you had a long week. Like acknowledging what you're observing, acknowledging what you know what
Yeah.
I mean? Instead
Yeah.
of just like, well, I'm not going to say that slick, snooty comment this time. Um, Actually say something kind and loving. You
Mm.
look beautiful today. I
Mm.
really like that shirt on you.
Oh,
Um,
thanks.
you know,
Yeah.
just whatever it is, you know what I mean? So, like,
Yeah.
really get intentional about how you engage with somebody, and how you engage with yourself. Because even, just the way that you relate to yourself is important. So, being able to
Mm.
say, you know what, um, the way I used to talk to myself was kind of like very raw. It was like, yo, like, you need to get your together.
Yeah.
Um, like if I would make a mistake, I was hard on myself. But when you're like that, especially if you have the tendency to be really hard on yourself, you have to replace that with being kind to yourself. It's okay to hold yourself accountable. And in fact, it is essential to hold yourself
Mm.
accountable,
Yeah.
especially if you have other people holding you accountable. But
Yeah.
you also have to make sure that you are kind to yourself and that you're making space for yourself to be safe, right?
Mm.
Are you including yourself? Meaning, like, can you see yourself winning? Um, Even when you make a mistake, can you still see yourself winning? Um, do you feel safe to learn? Can you make a mistake and have your own like self-talk be positive and encouraging, and help you get back on track? Can you create spaces where you can take risk in low stakes environments and then win? And that'll give you like the confidence booster that you need. So when you go into high stakes environments, you'll have this confidence that you can contribute and you can win.
Mm.
And then can you look and examine yourself and challenge yourself? Can you
Yeah.
challenge the fact that the way I was doing things was wrong and I need to make a change? And, oftentimes people don't like to think in terms of right and wrong. They're like, no, I was just, I was
Mm.
doing the best I could with the information I had at the time. And I totally understand that narrative. However, if you really weren't doing the best you could with the
Mm.
information you had at the time, meaning you knew better and you still made a whack decision, don't say you did your best with the information at the time.
Yeah, there's that quote, isn't there? If you know better, you do better. Um,
Exactly.
so yeah, I completely, get what you're saying there, and you touched upon so many key things as well in that one part. So you spoke about accountability. Now, firstly, I want to jump back onto that whole, if you remove something from your life, then replacing it with something else, because the universe abhors a vacuum. It just does not like a void. You do need to, and ideally, if you don't be intentional about what you're going to replace it with, there will be another bad habit, another bad behavior that will be quick to absorb, and you just won't move forward. So there's something that you said there about accountability as well, and that
Mm.
whole winning. Now, often when it comes to the whole winning and accountability, we can feel more accountable to somebody else, but self accountability can be a real struggle for some people, holding yourself accountable. You spoke about being a team player before and you was part of a team. And usually, if you want to be part of a winning team, you know that you've got the coach, you've got your team members, so you're going to be super motivated
Hmm.
to do your best. But how
hmm
can you be super motivated to do your best for yourself?
hmm
Like, have you got any experience on like personal what you've observed?
Yeah, for sure. And great questions. So man, the analogy that I use when I speak about teams and whatnot, you said, how can you do your best for yourself? How
Mm,
can you hold yourself accountable, be accountable to yourself? All the things in that vein. Um, that's where it starts,
mm,
right? That's how you got the spot on the team because you had some sort of gift, some sort of talent, some sort of skill set that,
mm.
you know, was valuable to the team.
Ah,
If you stop bringing that skill set, if you stop deploying that gift in that team, the team suffers.
yeah.
That in and of itself is enough motivation for me
Mm,
to say, I need to keep myself right. I need to make sure that I'm continuing to show up and bring the things that got me the spot on this team.
mm.
And then from there, when you look at like just a broader analogy, you got the team that
Yeah.
you're on, you've got your teammates, right? And then you've got coaches, you've got alumni, you've got um, a whole student body of people who, you know, are some of them are fans, some of them want your team to do well, some of them don't care, they kind of passively pay attention to what's going on.
Yeah.
And you know what I mean? Some other folks are like super fans and they're like always like in the mix, always wondering what's going on. And
Yeah.
anytime you have something, they're always there or whatever the case may be. And so you got these different role players. However, in a relationship, you have you and you have your teammate.
Yes.
You know, if you have too many teammates, like something wrong, right?
Oh yeah. People have too many teammates, that's for sure, when it comes to relationships. I've observed that.
Yes, yes. And so the key is um you said uh something about, you know, wanting to like be accountable to the coach and the team and you want to show up for folks. So you have to recognize who are the most important players, you know, there, which is you and your significant other. Um, it's y'all at the end of the day. You are the two who are supposed to be at practice every day, working out, exercising. Um, your partner sees you the way nobody else does. They
Mm,
see you when you are performing great. They see you when you're not performing great. They see you when you've like run your fastest. They saw you when you got an injury. They saw you play through injuries. They saw you play through pain. They've seen you practice when you didn't feel good.
mm,
They've seen you in all seasons, right? And fans don't see that. Fans don't support you through that. Your
mm.
teammate does.
Yeah.
So knowing that, it's important to understand that's who you should be giving your best to. That's why you should be showing up and keeping yourself accountable, keeping
Mm,
yourself honest, and giving your partner permission to keep you honest and hold you accountable as well. And likewise, you should have the same agreement with them to be able to keep them honest and hold them accountable. And
yeah.
that's super important.
Yeah. I completely get that is super important. I love that analogy, and I think that's going to really resonate when you put it in that context. Because what I'm seeing as well is rather than being on a winning team with your partner, is competition. And a lot of that is out there in narrative with this toxic masculinity that is out there, and a lot about being the alpha male. And there's some of the practices that are being preached out there, which is causing more competition in a relationship. Now, look, a little bit of healthy competition can be a bit fun with your partner, as long as you've got singing from the same hymn sheet, you're on the same page with it. But it's the toxic competition, the wanting to win, to have the better position than your partner, which is
hmm
causing some of these quote unquote toxic relationships. And I wondered what your view was on such things such as toxic masculinity, because I know there are a lot of people out there who are trying to reverse it by doing positive masculinity. So, do you have any views on what you're seeing with regards to toxic masculinity?
Yeah, in regards to toxic masculinity, it's very interesting. And it's what I see is a push and a pull in
Mhm.
society. And I see um, something that started a long time ago that has spiraled out of control. And what I see that started a while ago was a push for equity.
Mm.
And this push for equity um, across genders and across ethnic groups. And I don't use the term race in that same way that a lot of people do, because the human family is like the human race, and then there's ethnic groups, and there's different cultures, and then
Mhm.
there's different, people who speak different languages, come from different cultures, but they have the same skin color. Skin color is not. It's a thing that's kind of more divisive, and it does more damage than it does help. So there are so many social constructs that are designed to differentiate initially, but then in the wrong hands, they're used to divide.
Mm.
So um, there's nothing wrong with differentiation or difference. And it's important to be able to see difference and to be able to also understand that that difference has elements that can you, complement what you bring to the table. People have taken that and utilized it as a way to divide people and compete against one
Mm.
another, and to say this group is better than that group. And that can be gender, that can be ethnicity, that can be all kinds of things. And so, as it relates to gender, to your question regarding toxic masculinity,
Yeah.
um, there's been this evolution of what it means to be a man in society. Um, Growing up and like hanging around my guy friends, um, and then hanging around, my women friends. Like there's just a difference in the way that people move, and
Mm.
there are um, behaviors that have been associated to a gender, but they don't really fit in a box. So being aggressive, for
Yeah.
instance, is described as a masculine trait. And
Mhm.
then, so being super aggressive in a way that's negative and like putting people down and everything else has kind of been like this, I guess, labeled as toxic masculinity. And then there's females who have that similar aggressive, you know, nature,
Mhm.
um, or disposition, or they demonstrate those kind of behaviors in a way that is non-productive. So people say like you have your strengths and you have your weaknesses, but overuse of a strength, it becomes a weakness, right? And so when a person doesn't have enough self-awareness or self-regulation to understand when they're pushing, some sort of behavior so far on the spectrum or so far on the scale that it's basically kind of almost like being an extremist. And
Mm.
it's like, it's either this or it's that, you
Yeah.
know? And it's like this kind of vibrato behavior, it can become toxic. And so I just spoke real general for a moment just to kind of like lay out the fact that there's so much nuance and color to this, and it's not a one size fits all type
Yeah.
of, but there's a lot out there that um, is kind of pushing people in a direction of, this or that. And there's these narratives that um, have sprang up from femininity, when femininity or feminism was all about, you know, equity. It's like
Mm.
women were like pushing for equal rights and pushing for equity, equitable opportunity, so on and so forth. And so what's happened is again, there's a lot of people who've said, I want to share my perspective out loud, and rightfully so. Go ahead and share it. Just understand what your intention is. What do you want people to do with the information that you share? Um, and I think that's important.
Yeah.
Um, do you have to do it? No, but it will be helpful. It will be
Yeah.
helpful to understand if you're going to be influencing people in one way or another. Um, what do you want them to do and why? And so there are some unhealthy narratives out there, um, both on the masculine side as well as the feminine side, that are encouraging people to have this sense of superiority, gender
Yeah.
superiority. And it's like a
Yeah.
male and a female are not, you know, the same gender. So why would you even put those in competition as though one was supposed to be better than the other? When again, if you understand difference and you appreciate difference, then you understand that each of them bring their own, set of skills and contributions where they're meant to complement one another.
Yeah. And I can see how what you said there completely also links into what you said about when you're on a team. I'm going to bring it back to that whole team situation where you had a particular skill and talent that allowed you to be on that team. And that's really important when it comes to relationship dynamics too, just like what you said there, is that you're going to have your individual skills, the talents that you're going to bring. So there's no necessary, it's not, you don't have to compete around the whole situation, but it's embracing the differences and seeing, because there will be similarities, there will be differences, but it's embracing the differences and saying, okay, how can we work with those differences without having to have a battle? It's almost like battle of the sexes in a way, isn't it? That you can see out there. And it's being very intentional about what is that key message you want to leave people with, because you can put people in a dark place and leave them there in that pit, and they're thinking, okay, where do I go from here? I'll listen to more stuff and I'll be in that pit even more. That's probably what you see. So just talking more about being intentional then, because we've spoken about doing that inner work, understanding about having critical thinking. And there is a kind of notion out there that a lot of men aren't necessarily doing that work, that inner work, that growth work, in order to understand what it is that they want.
Hmm.
So would you say that there's any reasons why that might be?
Sure,
Or
I
if
would
that's a
say
myth or misconception?
there it is. It's a misconception. So, um, behavior gets expressed in a number of ways, and people make assumptions based on the way that they see behavior being expressed. It happens all the time. And so, the notion that men don't do the work needed, the self work, um, is a misconception, and it's a misunderstanding. So, there was lots of narratives out there that would suggest that women don't do the work. And then that could be, you know, a misconception as well. I would
Mm-hmm.
say that um to like to have a productive conversation about that, people need to understand um, how society uh, makes space or doesn't make space for men to express the fact that they are doing the work. And then
Mm.
what does it take for you, again, to break away from the popular narrative? So for me, I'm okay with being transparent and expressing how I feel about
Yeah.
things. Um, a lot of people might not feel that same sense of comfort, and it could be for a number of factors or reasons. Um, if you have an experience in life where you express yourself and you're vulnerable, and
Mm.
someone comes along and beats you over the head, for doing so, or uses it against you at some point,
Mm.
uses your vulnerability or something you've shared with them and weaponizes it,
Yeah.
it really causes you to shut down. And it's hurtful. And earlier we talked about psychological safety a little bit. So when you have a breach of psychological safety, you have um, a number of different responses. Um, you no longer want to put yourself out there in a way that could cause you to feel that kind of pain again.
Yeah.
And so that brings us to like healing. So you have to be able to heal, and then you have to be able to understand, are you healed? What healed looks like, what it sounds like. When I am healed, how do I express myself? When I am whole, how do I, interact with other people? When I am healed and healthy, what kind of, behavior do I expect and accept from other people? And how do I communicate that with people in a healthy and positive way? And then when I'm not getting that respect and I'm not receiving what I'm asking for, like just basic needs to be treated decent as a human being and to be treated as somebody who you say you love, respect, so on and so forth. When that doesn't happen, what's my recourse?
Yeah.
How do I then say, hey, what, thank you, but no thank you. It seems like you're not in a healthy place. You're not in a good place for this relationship to be successful. Even though you claimed you wanted it,
Yeah.
you're not doing the work to be able to make sure that we're healthy. So it's not just a one gender thing. It's definitely something that people need to work on no matter what gender they are.
Yeah. And you touched upon some really great, themes there, as you have done throughout this whole conversation, in terms of like vulnerability and letting people in and that whole healing, because there are different schools of thought on that. Can you heal whilst you are in a relationship? Whatever you're healing from, it could be a breakup, it could be childhood trauma, it could be whatever you need to heal on. Can you heal whilst in a relationship? Or is it best to do the healing work before you even start or embark on another relationship? So I'm not
Mm-hmm.
sure whether you can speak about that from what you've observed or even from a personal perspective as well.
Sure. I would say, in my opinion, in my experiences,
Hmm.
um, everybody's situation is going to be different. And what I've learned though is, again, people tend to run away from what hurts
Mm.
and run towards what makes them feel good.
Yeah.
So oftentimes, uh, especially in a breakup, um, people want to hurry up and feel better because breakups are
Mm.
hard and it's painful. It's painful in a way that, um, nobody else can see.
Yeah.
You know, if I got cut, you can see a cut on my hand, and
Yeah.
you can see there's a scar or whatever. Um, when my heart gets cut, nobody
Mm.
can see.
Yeah.
Um, when my soul, takes a beating, nobody can see it.
Yeah.
So, um, for whatever the reasons were that you were hurt, it's important that you take the time out to do what you need to do to heal. And meeting somebody new or connecting even with somebody who you already know in a romantic way, just because you're looking for comfort,
Mm.
um, is super, super, um, I'm gonna say unhealthy, and
Yeah.
it's dangerous for you, um, because now you're probably putting them in jeopardy because you're going to hurt them because
Mm.
what you're trying to chase is euphoria,
Yeah.
and you are, um, sadly delusional, you know, in the beginning stages of any relationship, whether you're healed or not. That's why it's important for people to take their time and be intentional to not get caught up in the euphoria of any new relationship. Can you heal, you
Mm.
know, in a new relationship, or should you wait? My personal perspective is you should wait. Um, Again, when you are, well, the Bible says it this way. It says, to him who is hungry, even what is bitter tastes sweet. And
Mm.
so it's like there was this notion that people was talking about over the last several, I'd say 5 years or so. We were talking about being thirsty. Oh,
Yeah.
she's thirsty. Oh, he's thirsty. And
Yeah.
it's, so if you're thirsty, you just want something to drink, you'll drink anything. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Um, if you hungry, even what is bitter tastes sweet. So you're not in a good place to make any sort of decision about
Yeah.
what you should be, connecting with relationally. It is important for you to connect with friends, like
Mm,
platonic friends, family members who are safe people for you. Safe meaning they're not going to take advantage of your vulnerable state of mind. They're not going to um, just take liberties that they shouldn't because they know you're in a vulnerable place.
yeah.
Um, they're not going to uh, offer things to you that wouldn't be helpful for you.
Mm,
But instead, they're going to encourage you and support you, be a listener for you, um, but not necessarily, they can't heal you.
yeah.
And you have to heal yourself.
Mm,
Um, People say time heals, but time doesn't necessarily heal, in my opinion. Um, Not if I sit here and just keep dwelling on what happened. I can do
absolutely.
that for the whole year, and I will not heal because a year
Yeah,
passed. Um,
absolutely.
Healing comes with I'm letting go of this. First, I have to accept what happened, um, and then I have to decide I'm going to let go of whatever it was that I was holding on to that's causing me the pain, and then I'm going to replace it with this other thing that heals me.
Yeah.
And a new person doesn't heal me because people don't heal you,
Mm,
right?
yeah.
The
Mm,
self work heals you.
mm. That's so, and exactly, what you do within that time is what is going to be the healing power and the gift, not the time itself. So, reflecting back on some of your, I guess, romantic experiences, past, current, how would
Mhm.
you describe the experiences and what you've learned from your own personal relationship experience?
Sure. Key things I would say is when you have standards in your life, they're there for a reason.
Mm,
Um, you may reach a point in your life where, you know, um, you start to embrace some of the really like mainstream narratives and whatnot, and you'll say like, oh, well, you know, nobody's perfect and this and that. And while that's true, there's a part of that equation that can be dangerous for you, because you don't need perfect,
yeah.
but you do need these things, which are your
Mm,
standards. Because if you have an understanding about what God has called you to do, if you don't believe in God and you just have an understanding about what you need to do to be living a life that you want to live, period. Those are your standards for you. So then if you want to add another whole human being to your life,
mhm,
that's what you're doing when you get in a relationship with somebody is you are choosing to go through life with somebody who has their own experiences, their own calling, their own vocation, their own dreams, desires, wants, and needs. And you're going to travel forward
yeah,
in time
yeah,
together, right? Um, if you're going to do that, you have to really embrace the reality that that's a whole person and they're not responsible for your happiness
mm,
and you're not responsible for their happiness. People get caught up in this notion of happiness. I'm not
yeah,
happy. You're not happy. You're not happy because of what? Um, because I haven't done anything to make you unhappy. Um, what usually makes people unhappy is what's going on in their mind and
yeah,
their interpretations of what somebody does. So, um, using the imagination for negativity is like optimism in reverse. And people talk about manifesting and all that stuff, and
yeah,
it's interesting to me. I think it's there's definitely something about it that has some weight. However, um, you cannot think happy thoughts and manifest yourself a happy relationship.
mm,
Um, it don't work like that. You have to be showing up for the relationship, bringing your best to the relationship, and communicating with your partner. And you have to drop your egos. You have to
mm,
realize that every several years, each one of you is an entirely different person than you were.
Yeah.
And if you're not willing to be curious and constantly get to know this person over and over and over
Mm.
again for the rest of your life, you're going to be missing something. Because while people say, oh, people don't change very much, like they do, they change a lot. And maybe people don't get the chance to get to know that new version of them because that person is scared to reveal that new version of themselves. And so usually that will lead to some sort of diminished quality of communication, which
Yeah.
then creates a division and separation, which then creates that, oh, I'm not happy anymore. And,
Mm.
inevitably it leads to the thing that you didn't want to happen because you didn't want to tell your partner who you are today versus who you were yesterday. So your behavior shows up as like, I'm distant and
Yeah.
uncommunicated. And now, you know, you don't feel like you know me anymore. I don't feel like I know you anymore. We don't have fun. Um, I just don't feel like I'm in love
Yeah.
anymore. Silly
Yeah.
things that
I
people
love
say,
you,
and
but
I
I'm not in love with
understand
you.
it, but exactly. Like, what do you right? You mean, you know what I mean? Like, um, love is a verb. Um,
Mm.
love is a verb. Love requires action. Love requires intention, and it's not something that just because you say it that it means it's there. So it's like, show me, you
Yeah.
know, show me. Show me by being present. Show me by demonstrating that you heard, what I said to you. Um,
Mm.
show me by like bringing something into my life that only you can bring.
Mm.
And I only want it from you.
Yeah.
And it's not with your body. Like
Mm.
it's it's you. Like
Yeah.
when you get into a relationship, before you get into a relationship, you should know what you bring to the table. And you should have a sense of what you want to share, what you want to give to someone. I think a lot of times people look at relationships and they're like, I'm looking at what I can get.
Yeah.
You know,
Uh-huh.
if I get with her or if I get with him,
Yeah.
like I can get this, I can get that. They're good at this. They're handsome. They're
Hmm.
beautiful. They got a good paying, career. Um, they drive a nice car. Those things are, they're just so surface level that that is not a sustainable model, and it has nothing to do with whether or not you're going to have a healthy and successful relationship. So
Yeah.
it's just a veneer, and it's kind of like I don't know if you've seen like a cartoon where like sometimes like they'll create an illusion, like the bad person in the cartoon will like
Mm.
take this like rickety haunted house and like basically use some sort of magical spell to make the person look at it and be like, wow, it's a beautiful mansion with a swimming pool and everything else that I ever dreamed of. And like they're
Yeah.
under the spell. And that's part of the euphoria. That's part of
Mm.
the illusions that happen early on in relationships. And then when you go inside, you're still under that, spell. And then something happens in the relationship. Oftentimes it's the first time the person says no,
Yeah.
or it's the first time the person um, can't deliver or doesn't deliver on something that either you all agreed to or something that you had an expectation that you didn't communicate.
Yeah.
And then you start to see little flashes of like what the real place looks like.
Hmm.
And that's actually what it looked like the whole time. So you
Yeah.
have to really understand like what's your value system. If you just value materialistic, superficial things, um, maybe you'll be happy in a relationship where somebody just provides you with materialistic things. But if you
Mm.
if you want depth, everybody don't want depth,
Yeah.
right? And
Yeah.
so I accept that too and I understand it. But for those who do want depth, then never lower your standard and settle for superficial because
Mm.
it's not going to be fulfilling.
Yeah. Absolutely. And it's that communication that is key from the start, because I would say that in order to create that psychological safety as well, communication is key. So, from your experiences and also what you do being the certified trainer there, how can we create that psychological safety to be able to communicate our needs? What is some of the core foundations that we need in order to communicate well?
Sure, you need agreement. Um, so we talked about earlier, respect and permission is that
Mm,
continuum, right? And so if you have if you have high levels of respect and low levels of permission, then
mm,
you have exploitation, right? So
okay.
then you know, I'm like super excited about your gifts,
Yeah.
but I'm not really excited about you. So then I'll
Mm,
give you high levels of permission.
mm,
Um, and then I'll give you low levels of respect though, because I don't really respect you, but I like your gifts. So in
yeah.
other words, I like your beauty. I like, what you do when we're alone. Um,
Mm,
but I don't really have a healthy respect for you. Um, so then I can end up exploiting you, right? But
okay.
then if I have like high levels of respect for you, but I give you low levels of permission, then I fall into it's a failure pattern. So there's two failure patterns. One is parentalism, the other one is exploitation. So I just went through exploitation.
Yeah.
Parentalism, if I have a high level of respect for you, so I respect you so much, I value you, I tell you that all the time. I try to do my best to demonstrate that I respect you. But you have very low levels of permission with me. Like,
Mm,
so I'm like hovering over you all the time, micromanaging, what you're doing, where you're going,
yeah.
who you're with. Um, and when I say micromanaging, I mean micromanaging. Like, I want to know who you talked to on the phone today. I want to know what y'all talked about. Um, so then I have what's called parentalism. So that's a failure pattern for psychological safety. So you
Mm,
want to avoid exploiting someone, and you want to avoid being like a parent. Like
okay.
they don't need supervision, you know. Um,
Yeah. And if they do, maybe that's a red flag.
if they do, or if you feel the need to, it could be a red flag for you,
Mm,
right? Um, because and I mean, if you don't trust somebody, then
yeah.
yeah, it's a red flag. But like, you shouldn't even be in that relationship in the first place. Like, if you need to go through somebody's phone, for instance,
Mm,
I've been in situations where I felt that way,
yeah.
and other people have been in situations where they felt that way with me. And in those situations, it would have been better for us to just say, hey, obviously, there's something going on here that's not aligning with our ability to trust each other in this
Yeah.
relationship. And we should examine that and decide I'm either going to trust you
Yeah.
and I'm going to worry about what's going on with you socially. Um, one, because I don't have time. Two,
Mm,
it is like draining me to think that there's something else going on that I need to know about that I don't know about, so on
yeah.
and so forth. So avoiding those failure patterns is important. And then the thing that people need to really be able to do is give each other respect and permission. So you need
Mm,
both. You need both to move up the continuum of
yeah.
feel included. You feel like you are my teammate. Um, and not just a feeling, right? But it's also an experience. Are you
Mm,
experiencing that from me?
yeah.
Are you experiencing me giving you the opportunity to be vulnerable with me? And then
Mm,
when you do demonstrate vulnerability, am I rewarding that or am I punishing that? And
mm.
so,
Oh,
yeah,
that's powerful, powerful share. Just bouncing back to, what you said there, and I think, those are really key things in terms of that respect and permission to allow people to become vulnerable, because vulnerability is key. And we can see that if you're not in that space where you feel safe to be vulnerable, then that will be a barrier to you letting people in to your life and to really deeply connecting with somebody. If you want depth, like we said, if you want depth in a relationship, that's fine. If you're looking for something more superficial, you need to get that clarity on your needs and on your standards. You mentioned earlier how you felt that love was a verb, and you spoke a lot about what love could mean. So just to kind of summarize it for you, what's your personal definition of love in a romantic context?
Wow, that's a big question.
Big one.
I love it. I love it. Love is a verb, right? And love is love is like an open hand. Love is holding somebody with your hands open.
Mm,
Um, love is liberating. Love gives you space to be here because you choose to. That's
mm,
love. Um, I'm giving you space to exist in my world with full respect, full permission. I'm not feeling the need to control what you do in here because I'm doing what I'm doing from a place of love.
mm,
And I'm trusting you to exist in my space in a place of love. And when you have that mutual love,
mm.
you're boundless. You're boundless. And you just imagine having a space, and we're talking about from a romantic standpoint.
Yeah.
Imagine being in a space with somebody where you literally can pour out all the love that you ever wanted to pour out and share with somebody. And you both can communicate and share new ways of sharing
Mm.
love that you didn't even imagine before. Like, that's love.
That's so powerful. That was so delicious. I was just shutting my eyes at points there and just thinking that felt like a beautiful visualization. Like I could just listen to that and just say, I can imagine that. Yes, 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 Matthew, I can imagine that. It's
Yeah,
so, so powerful. And I think that that's really going to connect with so many of the listeners out there. That so it's your personal definition, but I think it's, going to connect with so many people there too. Matthew, I'm going to bring this wonderful, wonderful conversation to a close now because you've shared so much and so much reflections. And I think it's going to put people, I think, into critical thinking because of what you have shared here today. But before we go, before we close out this beautiful conversation, I would love for you to be able to leave our listeners with one key takeaway that will help them along their journey of love, life, and relationships.
wonderful. And thank you. So, key takeaway. This is not everybody's, mantra or why they do what they do, but have an understanding of your own motivations. Um, when you're looking to get into any kind of relationship, especially if it's romantic, understand what's motivating you. Are you running from something just to get to something else? Or are you whole? Are you like healthy, happy, and in a good place? And you've identified something that you want to give, and you've identified this person as the one you want to give it to. That's one thing. The next thing I would say is how you function in this world. I talked about love in a sense of romance.
Mm,
Everything that I do my best to do it from a place of love. And what that allows me to do is function with a principle called acceptance.
mm,
Um, this world is full of things that make you smile, and it's full of things that break your heart.
mm.
And so, understanding that they're not mutually exclusive, but they're all happening all at the same time, do what you need to do to take amazing care of yourself. Amazing care of yourself, not good care, like
Mm.
amazing. So think about what amazing care of yourself would look like.
Yeah.
And it doesn't look like being selfish in a traditional sense,
Mm.
but it does mean being self-attentive,
Love
okay?
that.
And really understand just the environment that you function in every single day has an impact on who you are, and you have an impact on the environments that you're in every day.
Yeah. Oh, wow. I love that. I absolutely love that. And that clarity that you've given there of the difference between selfish as opposed to self-attentive. I think that's so, so, so powerful. And what a beautiful, beautiful takeaway. And when I'm speaking to people, I do say to them, if they are in a state of confusion, I don't know what to do, just put your hand on your heart and say, what would love do?
Mm.
And that can be quite a powerful question, because you can get so much clarity from that. And everything you shared about that last takeaway and your personal definition of love is just going to, it connected with me, and I know it's going to connect with so many people. So, Mathew, thank you so much for a powerful, empowering conversation today. It's been an honor and privilege to have you on the show. And thank you for everybody who has taken the time to listen to this episode today. I want to thank you for your time, for your energy and your attention. And until the next episode, take great care of yourself and others too.